You worked 10 hours today. You know you did because you felt every one of them. The stiff neck, the dry eyes, the weird guilt of eating lunch at your desk while half reading a Slack thread that didn't concern you. 10 hours. And if someone sat across from you right now and asked, "What did you actually accomplish?" Not what you were busy with, not what you responded to. What did you move forward? You'd pause. Then say something vague about a lot of stuff while your brain quietly does the math and comes up short. Because the honest answer is that roughly 90 minutes of those 10 hours produced anything that mattered. 90 minutes of real output buried under 8.5 hours of emails, meetings that could have been a message, reorganizing your Notion dashboard for the 4th time this month, and 20 minutes comparing project management apps you'll never switch to. You weren't lazy. You were exhausted by 6 p.m. You had the tabs, the lists, the color-coded calendar. You performed every ritual of a productive person, and at the end of it, almost nothing moved. There's a name for this. I call it productivity theater. The performance of being busy in ways that generate the sensation of progress without the substance of it. Emails feel productive. Meetings feel productive. Reorganizing your workflow feels productive. But feeling productive and being productive are two completely different games, and you've been playing the wrong one, brilliantly, for years. Here's the part that's going to feel wrong. The solution to your productivity problem isn't a better system. It's not a new app. It's not waking up earlier or batching your tasks more aggressively, or buying a planner with thicker paper. The solution is to stop doing things. Deliberately, strategically, permanently. Not pause, not delegate. Eliminate. Cancel commitments. Delete tasks. Say no to projects you already said yes to. Shrink your list until it scares you. Because the trick nobody uses isn't a technique, it's subtraction. And nobody uses it because in a world that worships busy, doing less feels like career suicide. It feels lazy. It feels irresponsible. It feels wrong. It works anyway. And in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you why. With the science, the audit that reveals where your time is bleeding, and the leverage effect that explains why cutting half your commitments doesn't halve the workload. It multiplies the results. This is going to make you uncomfortable. Subtraction always does. Let me explain why your brain fights this so hard. 3 forces keep you on the treadmill, and all 3 work against you simultaneously. The first one is chemical. Your brain doesn't distinguish between important and unimportant task completion. Dopamine fires for both. Clear your inbox. Dopamine. Reply to a Slack message. Dopamine. Check any box on your to-do list, even organized desktop files. Dopamine. Each tiny completion sends a micro-reward that says, "You did something." And that signal is addictive. Because the alternative, sitting with a blank document, grinding through the one project that actually matters, the one that won't reward you for hours or maybe days, produces nothing. No hit, no checkmark, no sense of motion. Your brain chooses the slot machine of small completions over the long game of meaningful work. Automatically, hundreds of times a day, without asking permission. The second force is social. There's a reason you tell people, "I've been so busy," and it sounds like a brag. In modern professional culture, busy equals important. If you're busy, you must be in demand. If you're in demand, you must be valuable. Saying, "I actually didn't do much this week, I focused on one thing," sounds dangerous. Like you're slacking. Like the person who does respond to emails at 11 p.m. should probably get your promotion instead. Busyness became identity armor somewhere in the last 20 years, and nobody voted on it. Now, "I'm so busy" is how people say "I matter" without saying it directly. And the thought of being visibly not busy, of having an empty afternoon, of declining a meeting, triggers something hard to name but easy to feel. The third force, the one nobody wants to look at, is emotional. Being constantly busy fills the silence. As long as you're answering emails and attending meetings and checking boxes, you don't have to sit with the questions that show up when the noise stops. Am I working on the right thing? Is this career what I want? Am I avoiding the hard project because I'm afraid I'll fail? The to-do list isn't just an organizational tool. It's a shelter. Three forces. Dopamine rewards the small tasks. Social pressure glorifies the busyness. Anxiety fills every empty space with more activity. All three pushing the same direction. Do more. And the one thing that would actually change your results, doing dramatically less, fights against all three at once. That's why this feels wrong. Not because it doesn't work, because your brain, your culture, and your fears are conspiring against it in perfect coordination. So let's talk about what the data actually says about your 10-hour days. Because you already suspect the answer. You've just never wanted to see the numbers. In 1897, an economist named Vilfredo Pareto noticed that 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. That distribution has since appeared in virtually everything. 80% of sales from 20% of customers, 80% of bugs from 20% of code. You've heard this. You nodded and changed nothing. So let me make it personal. Open your calendar from last week. Actually think about it. Count the hours you logged. Now ask yourself, not gently, not with the kind of self-talk that rounds up, how many of those hours directly advanced your most important goal? Not supported it, not related to it, directly pushed it forward. If you're honest, the number is somewhere between 15 and 25%. The rest was maintenance, obligation, and habit wearing a work costume. Let me name the usual suspects. The weekly status meeting where everyone reports what they're doing but nothing actually gets decided. 1 hour every week, 52 hours a year. The email threads where you're CC'd for visibility and feel obligated to scan. 30 minutes a day, about 130 hours a year. The Slack conversations that start with a question and wander into a 45-minute chat about nothing. 3 times a day, roughly 195 hours a year. The quick coffee that's really a 40-minute social obligation with zero professional value. Twice a week, 70 hours a year. Add those up, roughly 450 hours a year. That's 11 full work weeks, spent on activities that, if they disappeared tomorrow, would change nothing about your output, your career, or the quality of your work. 11 weeks. Gone. Not to laziness. To theater. And this isn't just my back-of-napkin math. Rescue Time analyzed over 185 million hours of work data and found that the average knowledge worker produces 2 hours and 48 minutes of actual productive output per day. A separate piece in the Harvard Business Review found that knowledge workers spend 41% of their time on activities that offer little satisfaction and could be handled by someone else or eliminated entirely. You already know which items on your list don't matter. You've known for months, but you keep doing them because cutting feels dangerous. What if someone needs that report? What if skipping the meeting signals I don't care? This fear, the fear of what might happen if you stop, is what keeps the treadmill spinning. And it's almost always wrong. Because the dirty truth of the busy trap is, most of what you're afraid to stop doing, nobody notices when it's gone. Here's where it stops being theory and starts being your actual Tuesday night. This isn't a time management exercise, it's an honesty exercise. You need 30 minutes, your calendar, your to-do list, and the willingness to ask 3 questions about every recurring commitment on them. The questions are simple. The answers are uncomfortable. That's how you know they're working. Question 1. If I stop doing this completely, what specifically would break in 30 days? Not what might happen. Not what could theoretically go wrong. What would break, with a name, a consequence, a measurable impact. If the answer is vague, Well, someone might notice. Or, it just feels important. Or, I've always done it. That's not a reason. That's inertia in a blazer. When I ran this on my own calendar, I found a weekly strategy sync I'd been hosting for 14 months. 14 months. I asked myself the question. Sat there for a full minute trying to produce a concrete answer. Nothing. Cancelled it that afternoon. 2 weeks later, I mentioned it to a colleague who'd been attending. His response, word for word. Oh, was that still happening? I thought we stopped that months ago. He'd been showing up to a meeting he assumed was already dead. For months. That's the busy trap distilled into one sentence. Apply this to every recurring meeting, every regular task, every ongoing commitment. You'll be surprised, and maybe a little sick, at how many items have no concrete answer. Question 2. Does this move the needle on my number one objective, or does it make me look busy? This requires you to know what your number one objective actually is. If you can't state it in one sentence, that's problem 0. And it explains why everything on your list feels equally important. Once you name it, hold every task against it. The meeting that's good for networking but doesn't connect. Making you look busy. The side project from your manager that's tangential to your deliverables. Making you look busy. The online course that's generally useful but not applicable right now. Making you look busy. Looking busy is not the same as being effective. Every hour spent performing busyness is an hour stolen from the 20% that matters. Question 3. Am I doing this because it matters or because I'm afraid of what happens if I stop? This separates strategic elimination from careless quitting. Some commitments survive not because they produce results, but because stopping triggers fear. Fear of judgment. They'll think I don't care. Fear of missing out. What if something happens and I'm not in the room? Fear of conflict. Fear of losing the identity of the person who always helps. These fear-maintained commitments are the most expensive items on your schedule. They consume time and emotional bandwidth. Every week you spend energy maintaining something you don't believe in, and that energy is unavailable for work that means something. After running these 3 questions across your calendar and task list, most people discover that 40 to 60% of their recurring commitments fail at least 2 of the 3. 40 to 60%. That's not trimming edges. That's discovering that half your professional life is structural busy work, maintained by inertia, social pressure, and fear. The question isn't whether you can afford to cut it. It's whether you can afford to keep carrying it for another year. Now, here's the part that turns this from a time-saving exercise into something bigger. When people eliminate 40 to 60% of their commitments, something happens that they never predict. Their output doesn't just increase by the proportional amount of time freed up. It increases way more than the math should allow. And that's because the most valuable thing you reclaim when you eliminate isn't hours. It's something far scarcer. Everyone who's tried strategic elimination reports the same thing. The results are wildly out of proportion to the time freed up. Someone cuts 5 hours of meetings and their creative output doubles. Someone cancels 3 recurring commitments and finishes a project they'd been stuck on for months in a single week. The arithmetic doesn't work on paper, but it works in neuroscience, because the most valuable resource you reclaim isn't time. It's unbroken cognitive bandwidth. Dr. Sophie Leroy at the University of Minnesota identified something called attention residue. When you switch from task A to task B, part of your cognitive resources stays attached to task A, especially if it was unfinished or you switched under time pressure, which is basically every switch in a busy person's day. That residue doesn't just linger. It measurably degrades your performance on whatever you do next. Slower processing, more errors, shallower thinking. And here's what makes it worse. The residue doesn't only come from tasks you're actively working on. It comes from tasks that are pending. Every open item on your to-do list, every unresolved project, every meeting on tomorrow's calendar. Each one occupies a background thread in your brain. Think of it like browser tabs you forgot to close. One tab, barely noticeable. 30 tabs and your whole system slows down. Your mental RAM is finite, and your to-do list has been eating it alive. This connects to something psychologist Bluma Zygarnik demonstrated in 1927. The brain keeps incomplete tasks active in working memory until they're resolved or deliberately abandoned. Your to-do list isn't a passive document. It's a collection of open cognitive loops, each pulling a thread of attention, a sliver of focus, a piece of working memory. Even when you're not looking at it, even when you're trying to sleep. That 1 a.m. thought about the email you forgot to send? That's an open loop reminding you it's still running. Now combine these. Every low-impact task on your list isn't just costing you the time it takes to do it. It's costing you the attention residue it smears across everything after. The cognitive thread it consumes while pending. The context switch tax when you bounce to and from it. Gloria Mark's research at UC Irvine found that a single task switch can cost up to 23 minutes of refocusing time. 8 switches a day. Conservative for most people. That's over 3 hours of cognitive performance lost. Not to the tasks themselves, to the friction between them. It's like cleaning out a cluttered room. You remove one box, technically 2 square feet freed, but the feeling of the room changes by 30%. Because clutter doesn't just take space, it takes mental space. Every object your eyes pass over is a micro-decision your brain processes. Deal with that, ignore it, move it, remove half the objects, and the room doesn't just get bigger, it gets quieter. Your to-do list works the same way. The items aren't just taking time, they're taking cognitive air. Cut them, and you don't just get hours back, you get your mind back. This is why elimination produces disproportionate results. When you cut 5 low-impact commitments, you don't just reclaim the 5 hours they consumed. You reclaim the attention residue they spread across your day. You close 5 cognitive background tabs. You eliminate 5 context switches and the refocusing they cost. The freed-up time is the visible gain. The freed-up cognitive bandwidth is the invisible multiplier. Someone cuts 30% of their commitments and sees their output jump by 200%. It's not magic, it's math. Just not the math you expected. Let me put this together. The busy trap showed you that most of your activity is noise. The elimination audit gave you the tool to separate signal from noise with 3 honest questions. And the focus leverage effect explains why cutting produces exponentially more than the time you free. This isn't a productivity hack, it's an operating principle. Warren Buffett's 25-5 rule. Write 25 goals, circle the top 5, actively avoid the other 20. Isn't about prioritization. It's about elimination. Those other 20 aren't unimportant. They're dangerous. Interesting enough to steal your time but not important enough to change your life. Your overstuffed to-do list isn't proof that you're productive. It's proof that you haven't learned to say no. Every productivity video ends by giving you something to add. A new system. A new habit. Another tool for the pile. I'm doing the opposite. Tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, I want you to create an anti-to-do list. Not a list of things to accomplish. A list of things you are officially, permanently going to stop doing. Open your calendar. Open your task list. Run the 3 questions on every recurring item. Write down, on paper, the first 3 things you're eliminating. Not pausing, not handing off. Gone. The meeting you attend out of habit? Cancel it. Send a message. I don't think this meeting is the best use of our time. Let's try async for a month and see if anything breaks. The weekly report nobody reads? Stop writing it. See if anyone notices. The project you agreed to out of guilt. Send the email tonight. I've reassessed my commitments and need to step back to focus on my primary work. 3 items, 3 eliminations, 3 lines on the anti-to-do list. Your brain is generating objections right now. What if I cut the wrong thing? You won't, because the things you should cut are the ones you've known for months, don't matter. What if people get upset? Some might, briefly. Then they'll adjust. What if I look like I don't care? You'll look like someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Here's the truth you've been circling for the last 15 minutes. You've been carrying a backpack full of rocks and wondering why you can't run. Every low-impact task, every fear-maintained commitment, every yes you said when your gut screamed no. It's a rock. And the trick that nobody uses isn't a better way to carry them. It's putting the backpack down. You don't need more energy. You don't need more hours. You don't need a better app. You need a shorter list and the nerve to defend it. That's the trick. It feels wrong. It works anyway. Productivity isn't about doing more things. It's about doing fewer things until what's left actually matters. Your anti-to-do list starts tonight. Drop a comment with the first thing you're cutting. The meeting, the task, the commitment. Name it out loud, because saying it makes it real, and keeping it silent is how the busy trap survives. If this made you rethink the weight you've been carrying, subscribe. I make content for people who'd rather do less that matters than more that doesn't. Go make the list shorter.